Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Good Lawyers Gone Bad podcast. My name is Stuart Teicher. Today's story is ripped from the headlines. The lawyers who got in trouble were just convicted last month. So when I tell this story, I'm going to use statements I read in the news articles, and I'm not going to say allegedly this and allegedly that. After all, these people were actually found guilty. However, some of the people who were found guilty said they're going to appeal the verdict, and you never know how that will pan out. So for that reason, I'm giving you a blanket, allegedly, which I intend to cover the entire program. The things I talk about in this program all allegedly happened. I'm not going to repeat that throughout the story because it ruins the narrative, but I'm giving you that disclaimer now, and it applies to everything in the story. It's all merely alleged. A little shout out to what I do for a living. I'm a professional speaker at continuing legal education events for lawyers. I teach ethics and writing courses, and if you're interested in bringing me out to deliver a CLE seminar, you can go to my website to see my course catalog. Go to stuartteicher.com or the website for this podcast, goodlawyersgonebad.com, and you can find that catalog. I do CLE programs, in-house events for law firms and law departments. I give standalone CLE seminars for bar associations, and I give a lot of plenaries at conventions and association meetings. So, to the lawyer listeners out there, feel free to recommend me to the committee that puts on your solo and small firm convention, or your bankruptcy section, your annual conference, or even your estate planning meeting. And that goes for state bar annual meetings as well, that sort of stuff. In the 1980s, there was a TV commercial for the investment firm Smith Barney. Do you remember it? It starred John Houseman, a very dignified actor with an old-school English accent. It was just Houseman walking through the Smith Barney office, and he was speaking he was delivering a short script as he walked towards the camera. By the end of his narrative, he was right on top of the camera, and he looked into the lens and said, "Smith Barney. They make money the old-fashioned way. They earn it." Well, the lawyers in today's story, they're sort of like Smith Barney. They made money the other old-fashioned way. They stole it. Yeah, today's lawyers, allegedly, had an awesome scam going. Enjoy their story called Cheating Death on the Highway. Ray was in the driver's seat of his 18-wheeler barreling down I-55, and he was tense. His 80,000-pound rig was fully loaded with auto parts, and he needed to be at the plant like yesterday. Ray was hauling a load of transmission components from a supplier in Memphis down to a Toyota assembly plant outside of New Orleans. He was tense because he had a tight delivery window. Toyota runs a unique just-in-time manufacturing system, which means that they produce only what's needed, when it's needed, and in an amount that's needed. It's highly efficient, and it controls costs because there is no inventory lying around and there's less waste. But the lack of inventory creates tension for guys like truck driver Ray. The parts Toyota needs for its auto manufacturing are designed to arrive just in time, as the name suggests. So, as soon as Ray pulls his truck into the plant, the parts he unloads go straight to the assembly line. And if they don't arrive, the line stops. And a stopped assembly line costs Toyota somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 a minute. Ray is very well aware of that reality. And that is why he's so tense. Because on this particular day, Ray is already behind schedule. There was a backup at a weigh station outside of Jackson, Mississippi that ate up about 45 minutes. He'd been on the phone with his dispatcher twice, and the dispatcher had been on the phone with the plant twice, and everyone up and down the line was tense. Ray was moving quickly down I-55, but not recklessly so. He couldn't afford a ticket, and the truck's electronic logging device was recording everything. So let's just say that he was slightly pushing the edge of the speed limit. He also skipped the longer rest stop he normally takes, and he was chugging a whole lot of coffee. Of course, being tired and tense is not the best combination for a trucker hauling 20 tons of auto parts. Ray navigated the big rig off I-55 and started to merge onto I-10, heading east towards New Orleans. That's when he heard a bang. It was actually much more than a bang. It felt like a violent explosion that resonated through the entire truck. His cab shuddered. He gripped the steering wheel instinctively and felt that it was fighting him. Ray peeked at his side mirror to check what happened, and he saw a car wedged under his truck. He thought, "Crap, I must have hit it. It must have been in my blind spot." Ray fought with the steering wheel and hit the brakes, trying to stop the truck, but he was also trying to avoid it from jackknifing. He was using every muscle in his body trying to control the rig and stop it from flipping over. But Ray's muscles weren't the only thing activated. His brain was activated too. He instantaneously got the horrifying thought that maybe he killed someone. Ray got the truck under control and pulled over. He jumped out of the truck, his legs were shaking, his hands were trembling, and he rushed over to the car. And there he found an entire family, parents and children, all luckily alive. But they were moaning and they were hurt. A wave of guilt came over Ray, and he immediately called 911. The only question was, who was the real victim? The young man tended to the campsite. He didn't know he was being watched. And just as he put logs onto the fire, someone jumped out of the woods and stabbed him in the back with a machete. The assailant then made his way over to a nearby camping tent. The young girl inside thought it was her boyfriend coming over to the tent, so she said, "Come in and get me." And that's exactly what he did. The man burst into the tent. The girl shrieked. And before she could jump out of her sleeping bag and flee, the man grabbed the sleeping bag. He dragged her out of the tent as she flailed inside the sleeping bag, and he pulled her across the campgrounds. As he approached a large tree, he grabbed the sleeping bag and swung it like a bag of rocks right up against the tree, instantly killing the girl inside. The assailant then hangs the sleeping bag above a campfire and lets it burn. The girl's boyfriend eventually realizes what's happened and runs to try to save her, but gets caught in a bear trap, and he's forced to sit and watch his girlfriend die. Did that scene sound familiar to you? It might, because it was from the 2009 remake of the movie Friday the 13th. And while the scene was fiction, the event actually happened. There really was a chase. There really was a burning sleeping bag hanging from a tree with a person trying to get out. It's just that the person in there was a stunt woman. Her name is Vanessa Mata. Vanessa Mata was a born performer. Originally from Caracas, Venezuela, Vanessa grew up in Miami, Florida. For most of her life, she was a professional ballet dancer, but it seemed that ballet was not, glitzy enough for her. And that might be why she moved to Los Angeles to perform in a different way. Vanessa Mata went to Tinseltown and became a stunt woman. For years, Vanessa appeared in movie after movie. Jurassic World, Dawn of the Planet of Apes, Get Out, 22 Jump Street, Fast and Furious 7, and Pretty Little Liars. There are actually over 100 entries on her IMDb page where she was either a stunt woman, a body double, or an actress in all kinds of movies and television shows. And her crowning achievement, it seems, was being nominated for the award of Best Fire at the 2010 Taurus Awards for the sleeping bag scene in Friday the 13th. But Vanessa's dalliance with stardom would be dashed. Her work as a Hollywood performer was, unfortunately, cut short when she was hurt in a car accident. An injury to her neck would prevent future jumps and falls. With her ability to perform stunts over, Vanessa Mata had to find a new way to make a living. She settled on a vocation that was probably just as old as being a player for hire. Vanessa Mata went to law school. When Vanessa first got out of law school, she took a job in the New Orleans area with a one-man law firm. Now, I have no way to prove what I'm about to say, but here's what I think. My gut tells me that was the only job Vanessa could find. I say that because of what happened to her shortly after she got that job. She was fired. The reason for her termination isn't clear, but it happened so quickly after she started working there that let's just say it's not exactly a glowing endorsement for her lawyering abilities. And I think that after she was fired, she had a tough time finding a job. Again, I don't have any evidence to support it, but consider what she did after she was fired. She opened up her own law office. That makes no sense. Who opens a law office straight out of law school? I mean, it's not unheard of, but it is unusual. There are two reasons that it's unusual. First, new lawyers have no idea what they're doing. None. I often say that I learned a lot about law from law school, but I learned how to be a lawyer from my first secretary. Marion was 75 years old when I started working for her, and she taught me what it meant to actually practice law in the real world. Second, and maybe more importantly, where are you going to get clients? It's nice to say that you're going to open up a law firm, but in order for you to make money, you need clients. And most recent law school graduates don't have a pool of people clamoring to hire a newly licensed attorney. The few people who do successfully open law firms straight out of school usually have some prior business experience in the field that they're going to practice and an existing network of people that could be clients. Vanessa Mata had neither. And that's why I think the likely explanation for Vanessa Mata going out on her own was that she was having trouble finding a job and she felt like she had no choice but to give a shot at opening her own law firm. I bet she did it out of desperation. The thing about desperation is that bad people can smell it. They can smell it a mile away. As Vanessa Mata embarked on her new life as a solo practitioner, she probably felt alone. She must have felt as if she had no one to turn to, no one to rely on. Have you ever been in a situation like that? You're just waiting for a savior to be delivered to your doorstep. In Vanessa Mata's case, it was the other way around. She was delivered to his doorstep. Her savior turned out to be her landlord. If you're going to open up a law firm, you need to find space. So Vanessa Mata went hunting in the New Orleans metropolitan area. She ended up finding space in a building owned by a guy named Sean Alfordish. Alfordish, it seems, was eager to rent to Vanessa. Why? Well, maybe he felt bad for her. He could surely empathize with her predicament. After all, Sean Alfordish was an attorney himself. Well, that's not exactly an accurate statement. Sean Alfordish used to be an attorney. He wasn't practicing anymore, and he didn't stop practicing by choice. No, Sean Alfordish had been required to stop practicing law because he was disbarred. About 5 years before he met Vanessa Mata, Sean Alfordish was president of the Louisiana Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association, a group that represents owners and trainers of thoroughbred horses, racehorses. Apparently, Alfordish was accused of messing around with the group's funds and rigging elections for the association, and he was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. He pled guilty and spent over 2 years in federal prison. They also took away his license to practice law. Well, disbarred attorneys got to eat too. So it seems that Sean Alfordish decided to be a landlord. When Vanessa Mata walked into Alfordish's building, he seems to have been particularly motivated to help her. Was it because she was a new lawyer struggling to make it and he empathized with her situation? Or was it because she was a young, attractive single woman who most likely seemed a little desperate? Tough to say. But what is clear is that Sean Alfordish decided to take Vanessa under his wing. You see, a savior can sense when someone is vulnerable and in need of assistance. But a wolf can too. Vanessa Mata decided that her practice would focus on personal injury law, and that made sense. Personal injury car accident cases are lucrative for lawyers for one fundamental reason. They work on contingencies. A contingency fee means that the agreement makes no money up front. Instead, they take a percentage of whatever the client wins, typically about a third or maybe even 40%. So if a case settles for $300,000, the lawyer walks away with $100,000 or more from a single case. The client pays nothing if they lose, the lawyer bears all of the risk, but they get a large reward if they win. Now layer on top of that the way damages are calculated in personal injury cases. The client gets reimbursed for medical bills, so if there's treatment or surgery, they get that money. But it's not just medical bills. The law allows recovery for pain and suffering, lost wages, future lost earning capacity, future medical expenses, and loss of enjoyment of life. The awards a client can receive in those claims can be enormous. A serious injury to someone who earns a good living could generate damages worth millions of dollars, and that makes the lawyer's fee huge. Now, throw in insurance. Almost every car accident involves an insurance company on the other side. Insurance companies have deep pockets and a strong incentive to settle because they don't want to go to trial. After all, a trial is expensive, unpredictable, and public. So the vast majority of personal injury cases settle. That means the lawyer often collects a large fee without ever setting foot in a courtroom. The lawyers who make the most money are the ones who could operate on volume. Do the math. If a case settles for $300,000 and it generates a fee of $100,000, well, you settle 10 of those and you're looking at $1 million in legal fees. By the way, I told you in the past that I wrote a book, right? The Crash and Burn of a Super Lawyer. It's about the massive destruction of lawyer F. Lee Bailey, America's first modern celebrity lawyer. One of the things that he complained to me about when I interviewed him is that he was upset he went into criminal defense work because criminal defense lawyers get paid hourly. The big money, he said, was in contingency fee cases in personal injury matters. You can buy that book in print or ebook on Amazon, The Crash and Burn of a Super Lawyer. Well, for Vanessa Mata, it was a no-brainer to go into personal injury law. The money was there if you could find the clients. Clients with serious, valuable injuries. Like families who were driving down the highway in New Orleans and collided with a tractor-trailer delivering auto parts to a Toyota factory. Ray, the Toyota delivering truck driver, must have felt horrible when he realized that his big rig had collided with a car that was fully loaded with a family. The father was in the driver's seat, the mother in the passenger side, and the 3 kids buckled in the back. And yes, they were all alive, but they were all complaining about being badly injured. When the cops arrived at the scene, the family explained everything to the officers. They provided their driver's licenses and insurance information, and everything was in order. They told the officers about their injuries in detail, and when they were asked if they wanted medical assistance, they declined. They told the officer that they'd get assistance on their own. As Ray left the scene and headed toward the Toyota plant, he probably thought that it was a miracle that the family wasn't killed. It would make sense for him to think that. But it wasn't the truth. It wasn't a miracle at all. In fact, it had all been meticulously arranged. The entire episode was put together by a guy named Cornelius Garrison. Cornelius Garrison ran a t-shirt print shop and a recording studio. But let's face it, there's only so much money someone can make silkscreening t-shirts and recording beat-list musicians. So Cornelius Garrison went looking for other work. And when he found it, he kept his new job under wraps. He didn't even tell his girlfriend what he did, and she was super confused. Every day he'd come home from work, she would have to pick shards of glass out of his hair. She asked him one night, "Cornelius, what do you do for work?" Cornelius snapped back at her. He said, "It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it." And then he would leave for work and simply say, "I'm going to handle my business." Cornelius's girlfriend did as she was told, but she was worried. She worried because whatever Cornelius was involved in, well, it seemed dangerous. She was right. Cornelius's new job was being a slammer. Cornelius Garrison arranged fake car accidents with fake victims who worked with fake doctors to sue insurance companies and claim fake injuries. The insurance companies then paid real money to compensate the fake victims for their fake injuries. And a whole lot of people up and down the line got rich in the process. Here is how it worked. First, Cornelius meets with the other people who will be riding in the car with him. They will be the victims of the accident, the ones who will make the injury claims. Those people need to be carefully vetted. Cornelius needs to make sure that everyone has valid driver's licenses and that their insurance is also valid. He even has to check the policy limits to make sure there's enough coverage to make the entire effort worthwhile. If the coverage is too low, he'll work with the people to beef up their policy limits before they hit the road. Then Cornelius needs to scope out an area where the accident will occur. It needs to be quiet and relatively untraveled. An area without many houses around and preferably with some views that are obstructed by trees because that minimizes the chance of unwanted witnesses. When the day of the accident arrives, Cornelius briefs the passengers. He explains the roles they'll play. He goes through each step of the process like a carefully choreographed dance. Then he loads up his car with the passengers, and they hit the road. It's Cornelius who plays the role of the slammer with the passengers in his car, and they're being followed by another car driven by a second member of the crew called the spotter. They all then head out and go look for a truck. A big, juicy, well-insured truck. Cornelius heads to an out-of-the-way location, maybe one where a big rig is on its way to deliver, transmission parts to a Toyota factory or something. When Cornelius identifies the truck he's going to target, he calls his accomplice who's driving the car trailing behind him, and he tells him to get into position. Getting into position means that the guy driving the car behind him needs to give Cornelius some room, to put a drop of distance between the cars. The trail car also needs to run interference and make sure that no other vehicles get in the way. The accident is about to go down. Cornelius then moves alongside the truck. He waits until the 18-wheeler is about to make a turn, and then he maneuvers the car to get in the truck driver's blind spot. And at the precise moment that only an experienced slammer can detect, Cornelius then turns the car straight into the truck. Now, you can't just collide with an 18-wheeler haphazardly. You'll never walk away. An inexperienced driver could get themselves killed, could get the passengers killed, or could even get the truck driver killed. That would not be optimal. The goal is to get paid for injuries, not get involved with what would basically end up being a murder case. So Cornelius uses his skill as a slammer. He turns the car into the truck in a way that will cause just enough damage to make the passengers' fake injuries plausible, but not so much damage that it causes a total wreck. Immediately after the accident occurs, the real dance starts. As soon as the vehicles come to a stop, Cornelius jumps out of the car. The passenger next to him slides into the driver's seat. All of the other passengers in the vehicle assume their predetermined positions. At that moment, the spotter's car, who was trailing, pulls up behind the rig and positions itself so the truck driver can't see it. Cornelius then jumps into the spotter's car, and they take off. By the time the truck driver approaches the car he collided with, Cornelius is gone, and the passengers are ready to deliver their lines about their injuries to the truck driver and the cops who eventually arrive on the scene. The slammer's passenger will claim that they were the one operating the vehicle that was involved in the wreck. Miraculously, a whole bunch of witnesses will appear, all of whom claim that the driver of the 18-wheeler caused the crash. All of the people in the car, of course they're not really hurt, but they tell everyone that they are. They explain all of the predetermined aches and pains so that the ailments they complain of at that time match the injuries they'll sue for later. You might be wondering, why doesn't Cornelius just stay in the driver's seat and claim the injuries? Well, he did that once, and he had a 6-figure payday. But there's only so many times the same guy can sue for injuries. So the slammers need to perfect their craft of driving cars into trucks, recruit new passengers for future crashes, and do that little dance so that they get away every time. Those victims that are recruited have to be careful at the crash scene. They need to make it very apparent that they were hurt, but they don't want to go so overboard that they have to go to the hospital. In fact, refusing medical care at the scene is a critical part of the plan. Remember, the whole operation is a sham, and everyone involved with this operation is scamming the system. The scheme depends on steering those allegedly injured passengers to specific doctors and clinics who are in on the scam. Those specific doctors would generate extensive injury documentation and billings for the non-existent injuries. But if the victims left the scene in an ambulance, well, now you bring in a whole bunch of people who are not in on the scam, and those people will be creating a paper trail. EMTs and ER doctors do medical examinations and write reports, and those real reports could destroy the fake claims. So ambulances are a big no-no. Cornelius Garrison was one of the many people who learned the art of slamming. In fact, the slamming industry turned into just that, an industry. Groups of slammers would meet under the Claiborne Avenue overpass in New Orleans. People looking to scam the system would come by and get paired up with a slammer. At one point, there were so many people showing up at the overpass that slammers would have to wait on a line to get assigned to a group of passengers. But the slamming, scamming system couldn't exist without one more person. One more crooked player that was critical to make the scam work. You need a lawyer. After the accident, the passenger gets bogus medical treatment for non-existing injuries to their neck and back. Sometimes the passengers even get surgeries they didn't need just to kick up the amount of the medical expenses and increase the severity of the injuries. And that is why the lawyer is the final critical link in the slamming chain. You need to sue for those injuries to make money. So the lawyer files suit against the truck driver, the trucking company, and the trucking company's insurance company. They claim all the injuries claimed to be suffered by the fake victims, and then they litigate, or, more likely, settle the phony matters with the insurance company and make a ton of money. Each slammer has a lawyer that they partner with. To make the process go smoothly, they create price lists. Some slammers make $1,000 for each passenger they deliver to the lawyer that was involved in a crash with an 18-wheeler, and $500 for passengers involved in regular auto accidents. Of course, if anybody saw these payments being made by the lawyers, they'd seem like shady kickbacks. So to avoid raising suspicion, slammers would be employed by law firms as sort of utility employees, like gophers, someone who does some errands, does some deliveries, and, other odd jobs. That way, the payment made to them wouldn't seem so out of the ordinary. So a slammer can only make money if they're connected to a lawyer. Lucky for Cornelius Garrison, he had a lawyer connection. Well, sorta. The guy he was connected to used to be a lawyer. That was until Sean Alfordish got disbarred. And that is most likely why Sean Alfordish took a shine to our former stunt woman turned brand new lawyer, Vanessa Mata. Sean was hooked in with the slammers, but he couldn't provide the key link in the scam chain. He couldn't actually file the lawsuits because he was disbarred. But Vanessa Mata, she could do it. And because Vanessa Mata was in a desperate situation, she probably would do it. If you believe Vanessa, she claims that Sean took advantage of her. She claims that she had no idea that her clients were scammers. If you believe Cornelius Garrison, Vanessa Mata knew exactly what was going on. Why does Cornelius' story seem more realistic? 2 reasons. First, lo and behold, just a few years after opening her law office with absolutely no experience, no contacts, and no client base, Vanessa Mata was making a mint. Her practice took off. She ran commercials where she called herself a stunt woman turned badass attorney. Mata also became a presence on billboards where she urged the injured to send her in. Second, Sean Alfordish and Vanessa Mata soon started dating. Before you knew it, they were engaged. Are you going to tell me that Alfordish kept the whole slamming thing to himself? His fiancée had no idea about his massive scheme? Please. The law firm was making so much money, and it was all just so easy that one slammer said that the scheme was easier and less risky than selling drugs. The operation went smoothly for years. The group even expanded. Cornelius Garrison brought in a guy named Red Harris to learn the slamming ways. Cornelius knew Harris because the two of them grew up in the same housing projects in Florida. Harris would later say, "Cornelius taught me the game." But all was not golden in Slammerland. Guys like Cornelius Garrison and Red Harris soon believed that there was a weak link in the scamming chain. It wasn't the driving. That was the easy part. It wasn't finding passengers. There was a large pool of people looking to work the scam. The problem was getting paid. The lawyers, it seemed, were becoming stingy. And one particular event made Cornelius and Red Harris quite upset. On one ride, the slam went off without a hitch. Cornelius headed out in a car loaded with another passenger and the passenger's pregnant wife. Cornelius drove the car into a rig and then jumped into Harris's trailing car, leaving the passenger and his now fake injured pregnant wife to do the rest. When the whole thing was over, Cornelius and Harris presented the passenger and his wife to Sean Alfordish and Vanessa Mata, and they waited for their money. And they waited and waited and waited. But the slammer and the spotter never got paid. That case made the duo particularly furious because they worked that crash hard. The passenger ended up getting surgery he didn't need. The crew coached the victims intensely in that matter, and they went to the effort of fabricating all sorts of documents that were needed to cover their tracks. Cornelius Garrison was angry. And he was torn. Cornelius really liked Vanessa Mata. He had a soft spot for her. But money is thicker than friendship, and when Mata stopped paying, Cornelius got pissed. There are two reasons for why Vanessa Mata and Sean Alfordish probably stopped paying their slammer crew. One is that they were cheap and they wanted to keep the money to themselves. Could be. But the more likely reason is that they thought they were being watched. And if that's what they thought, they'd have been right. Word on the street was that there was a federal investigation underway. How did it get started? It was the lawyers representing the truckers. It seems that the defense lawyers, the lawyers representing the insurance companies and the truckers being sued by these scammers, it seemed that they started to notice some consistencies. Not inconsistencies. They noticed consistencies. Commonalities started to emerge among the various cases. Defense lawyers noticed that wrecks were all occurring in the same locations. And then they started to dig deeper, and they looked into the backgrounds of the victims from those accidents. They checked the victims' social media posts and their lists of connections on social media platforms, and the lawyers noticed that many of the victims were all coincidentally connected to the same person. The defense lawyers brought their suspicion to the FBI, and using phone records, the feds confirmed it. The one connection that all of those victims had in common was Cornelius Garrison. So Mata and Alfordish might have sensed that the feds were poking around. And it's probably why Vanessa Mata met with Cornelius and told him to stay low. She probably told him that they believed they were all in the FBI's crosshairs. But Cornelius didn't want to hear it. At their meeting, Cornelius was fuming. He told the lawyer, "I want my money." The longer the lawyer stonewalled him, the angrier Cornelius Garrison became. He once complained to his cousin, "Vanessa has been trying to play me." As time went on, Cornelius's animosity only grew. It got so bad that he contemplated doing the unthinkable. One day, while sitting in his truck complaining to his cousin about the money problems Vanessa Mata was causing, Cornelius told his cousin, "I'm going to rat on her." Shortly thereafter, Cornelius Garrison was approached by the feds. It turns out that not only had the authorities been looking into the scheme, but they actually gave the investigation a name. They called it Operation Sideswipe. By the time the FBI approached Cornelius as part of the investigation, he was primed. He was so angry that he hadn't been paid that it didn't take much urging at all to get Cornelius to cooperate. Sure, they pressed him by explaining that he was looking at significant jail time if he didn't cooperate, but they didn't really have to twist his arm too hard. Cornelius Garrison was ready to serve up Sean Alfordish and Vanessa Mata. Anyone who met with Cornelius around that time must have felt that something was going on with him. He acted jittery. People around him just started to feel uneasy. The lawyers apparently felt it as well. After arranging hundreds of bogus wrecks over decades, Vanessa Mata and Sean Alfordish were apparently ready to sever ties with their slammer. Luckily, they had a replacement waiting in the wings. Cornelius's old friend and current collaborator, Red Harris, also saw the handwriting on the wall. Harris started to branch off from Garrison, and he started to stage wrecks for Vanessa Mata on his own. The group switched from accidents with big rigs to wrecks with regular cars because those trucking defense lawyers were looking at things a little too closely. Harris once confirmed that he was increasing his direct work with the lawyers. He said, "I'd just tell Vanessa I'd be back with another one. She'd tell me to make sure I hit him right and that the policy was high." Mata and Alfordish were apparently not content to simply switch their collaboration from Cornelius to Red Harris. It seems that the lawyers were worried that Cornelius was going to talk to the authorities. They were more right than they could have imagined. Cornelius Garrison was completely selling out Vanessa Mata and Sean Alfordish behind their backs. According to an FBI memo, Garrison had shown agents $192,000 in checks from Alfordish's company that he said were for dozens of bogus wrecks. Cornelius told agents that Alfordish instructed him that if anything ever happened, Cornelius should just say the payments were for construction work. Alfordish and Mata clearly felt that they were in trouble, and that's when they tried to shut up Cornelius Garrison. First, Sean Alfordish tried to coax Cornelius to leave town. "Move to the Bahamas," Alfordish told him. "We'll pay for it." When Cornelius didn't go for that, Alfordish changed tactics. He offered Garrison $500,000 to take the fall for this scheme. But Cornelius balked at that, too. Everyone was on edge. Mata, Alfordish, Red Harris, and Cornelius Garrison. The lawyers were convinced that Cornelius was talking to the feds, and he was. Meanwhile, Cornelius wasn't so excited about how that was working out. He'd been talking to the FBI for months. He was telling them all about the operation. And he came to realize that no matter how much he cooperated, he wasn't going to get off scot-free. In the fall of 2020, Cornelius met with FBI agents and federal prosecutors, and they confirmed that Cornelius would have to pay the price. "We're going to indict you soon," they told Cornelius. Cornelius wasn't exactly surprised. He was represented by a public defender, and by that time, he figured he'd be looking at some prison time. After a while, Cornelius came to peace with that reality, and as the investigation dragged on, he actually seemed eager to just put the whole miserable chapter of his life behind him. After prison, he planned to move to Oregon and start over. But over at the law office, the walls were closing in on the Mata-Alfordish slamming scheme, and it was clear that the person pushing in those walls was Cornelius Garrison. He had become a liability that could no longer be afforded. Sean Alfordish met with his now very valuable collaborator, Red Harris, and he told him that they needed to do something about Cornelius. All of the attempts to buy him off were for naught, so it was time to get serious. Alfordish explained that Cornelius was a rat and a snitch. Then he told Red that it would be better if Cornelius were dead. Sean Alfordish asked Red Harris, "Do you know anyone who could get this job done?" Harris did know someone, but it would be costly. So the two devised a plan. Alfordish would supply the money, and Harris would supply the hitman, an acquaintance known as Chunky Parker. Harris arranged a meeting between Sean Alfordish and Chunky Parker. It was at that meeting that the deal was apparently struck. Parker would take out Cornelius Garrison. Harris met with Chunky Parker several times, ostensibly providing a bunch of cash along with other items, and then they just sort of sat back and waited for the right time. On a Friday in September, the lead FBI investigator in Operation Sideswipe got a call from a federal prosecutor saying that Cornelius Garrison had been indicted. The news would hit the press that weekend. The investigator called Cornelius and told him, "Come on over to my office next week to talk. Things are going down." Cornelius agreed. He explained that he was going to visit his mother in New Orleans that weekend and that he'd come to the investigator's office on Monday. That same day, Chunky Parker was making arrangements. It seems that he was preparing to leave town for a while, so Chunky withdrew $47,000 from his bank account. But he had some business to attend to before heading out. For that, he met with Red Harris in a parking lot near Interstate 10. When they met, Chunky had a gun, mask, and gloves. Harris gave Chunky a burner phone so they could communicate undetected. The following day, Cornelius Garrison was at his mother's house in Gentilly, Louisiana. It seems that he got a text message telling him that Red Harris wanted to meet. Garrison didn't want to go, but the texts were apparently quite persuasive, and Cornelius agreed to attend the meeting. When Cornelius walked out of the front door of his mother's house, Chunky Parker emerged from the darkness wearing the mask and gloves. He pumped 10 bullets into Cornelius Garrison, execution style. Cornelius died instantly on the front stoop of his mother's home. That Monday, the prosecutors got word that Cornelius was dead. The only people more distraught than Cornelius Garrison's mother were Cornelius Garrison's handlers at the FBI. He was the key witness, and when he was killed, it was a major problem for the investigation. The feds needed another witness, so they turned their attention on Red Harris. It seems like the minute they focused on Red, pieces of the puzzle just started to fall into place. Authorities searched an auto shop that Red owned and found a blank retainer form for accident attorney Vanessa Mata. There was also a recent contract for Mata to represent Harris's cousin over a recent car crash. Then they looked at Red's phone. It seemed that Red Harris gave Chunky Partner that burner phone a little too late. The cops were apparently able to use phone records to connect Harris and Chunky Parker to the killing of Cornelius Garrison. But instead of arresting them right away, the cops watched both of them, waiting to see if they would lead them to anyone else who might be involved. About a week after the Cornelius murder, cops found that Chunky Parker was searching the internet for information about disbarred lawyer Sean Alfordish. The feds arrested Red Harris and got him to flip. The man spilled everything. He admitted that he told his girlfriend they were going to set up Cornelius Garrison and that he threatened to kill her if she told anybody. He told them that he arranged to have Cornelius attend a meeting and that he conspired with Chunky Parker to have Cornelius killed that night. He also admitted that he set up a meeting between Chunky Parker and Sean Alfordish to orchestrate Cornelius's killing. In December of 2024, Vanessa Mata and Sean Alfordish were indicted along with 64 other people. Vanessa's law license was suspended. Sean Alfordish surrendered to authorities and was sent to jail. They put him in jail because they were worried that he might meddle with witnesses, so they kept him locked up. Vanessa Mata was arraigned, pled not guilty, and was released on bond. One of the reasons she might have been released was that a few months earlier she gave birth to a child. The father was Sean Alfordish. The defendants would be tried separately, as is the case in many criminal matters, and Vanessa Mata went first. Her trial began in March of 2026. Red Harris, who had already pled guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, and causing death through a firearm, well, he was the key witness. He testified in person in prison garb while wearing ankle shackles. Prosecutors claimed that Vanessa Mata was one of the ringleaders of the massive slamming scam. She didn't have a whole lot to go with defense-wise. They couldn't and didn't deny that the slammers did what they did. But Vanessa Mata denied knowing about it. She argued that while she now acknowledges the wrecks were staged, at the time she was unwittingly duped into bringing bogus cases by the older and more experienced Sean Alfordish. In support of that argument, she produced nothing. Mata's defense didn't produce a single witness. After a 3-week trial, the jury deliberated for 5 hours. On March 20th, 2026, Vanessa Mata was convicted on all charges. When the verdict was read in the packed courtroom, Vanessa Mata's mother passed out in the front row, falling to the carpet. Vanessa wept. She couldn't control herself. She began to gag, and she vomited into a trash pail for several minutes while a nearby woman held her hair back. Vanessa Mata was immediately remanded to federal custody. Vanessa's sentencing is scheduled for July 2026. She faces decades in prison and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. She, of course, plans to appeal. Sean Alfordish, he'll face charges for fraud and murder in August of 2026. Of the 64 people charged so far, there have been 50 guilty verdicts. Like I said, ripped right out of the headlines. Vanessa Mata was convicted just a couple of weeks before I recorded this. I'll watch the news and let you know how things pan out. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Please don't forget to go to your podcast platform of choice and like us and rate us and say nice things in the comments. Oh, and Haley, drive carefully.